In this video, we're going to talk about bankroll management. And just ahead of time, just to let you know, this may be a bit of a lengthy video because we have 6 different slides to cover. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. So before we talk about bankroll management, we need to talk about what a poker bankroll is. A poker bankroll is nothing more than the amount of money that you set aside for the sole purpose of playing poker. So let's say, for example, you have $5,000 sitting in your bank account. Well, the amount of money that you specifically set aside only for playing poker, that's going to be your poker bankroll. So let's say that you decide you want to start playing online microstakes and you set aside $100 and you're only going to use that to play poker. Well, that's going to be your bankroll. So now we're going to talk about bankroll management, which is commonly simply called BRM. So bankroll management, what is it? Well, it's the method in which you choose to manage your money or your bankroll to determine what stakes you play, specifically what stakes you can afford to play. So when I'm talking about stakes, I'm talking about the buy-in for the game. And for example, this could be a $5 buy-in game, it could be a $10 buy-in game, and so forth. And in addition to that, it's not only determining how you're going to manage that money to determine what stakes you can afford to play, but it's also the process of determining when you should move up or move down from one stake to another, depending upon the size of your bankroll. And we'll talk about that, and that's specifically called taking shots. So why do we talk about bankroll management? Why is it important? Well, as a recreational player and somebody that's playing the micro stakes, it's really not that important because if we're playing, let's say, a $2 buy-in game, we can always reload. Let's say if we deposit $50 and we lose it, it's not that big of a deal, right? But if you decide to move up in stakes where maybe you're playing $30 buy-in games, which we call 30 NL, or $50 buy-in games, which we call 50 NL, which is in all likelihood a good possibility if you study on your game and you focus and you decide to move up the stakes, then you really need to consider bankroll management because 20 buy-ins at 50 NL is quite a lot of money compared to 2 NL, which is our $2 buy-in. So the primary goal of bankroll management is to reduce what we call our risk of ruin, which is simply stating the likelihood of us going bust and losing our bankroll. In other words, just losing it all to our opponents. So let's talk about recommended bankroll size. So what I've done is for my last book, Master Microstakes Poker, I utilized a poker variance calculator, and what I did is I inputted into that calculator a sample size of 100,000 hands, and I put the risk of ruin at 5%. So in other words, what this did is it calculated based upon various win rates, which are big blind per 100 win rates, to determine the amount of buy-ins that you would need, where 95% of the time over 100,000 hands, you would not go broke. So since this course is geared towards beginning and struggling poker players with marginal win rates, that's what I'm using here. So 1 big blind per 100 up to 5 big blind per 100. These are going to be what we would consider marginal win rates. So if you haven't seen the BB per 100 win rate, what it is it's the amount of big blinds you win per every 100 hands that you play. And this is the most common type of a win rate that's calculated for online poker. And in a couple different slides, I'll show you how to calculate this. But if you use a tool such as Poker Tracker or Hold'em Manager or some other poker tracking tool, pretty much all of them are going to be calculating your win rates in this BB per 100 win rate. So rather than doing an hourly win rate like you would do for live poker, we typically just do a BB per 100 win rate for online poker. So what you're going to notice here is that I have 1 big blind per 100, 2 big blind per 100, 3 big blinds per 100, 4 big blinds per 100, and 5 big blinds per 100. And what you'll notice is that the smaller win rate, the bigger your bankroll needs to be. Now there's a caveat to this. If you're a losing player, you're never going to have enough because if you're losing, you're eventually going to lose your bankroll over time. So the goal is, if you are currently a losing poker player, our goal is to transform you into a winning poker player. And from just a basic perspective, if you're not losing money, that's good because you're not a losing poker player. But the goal is to have a winning long-term rate. So we want to strive to have somewhere around, I would say, if you want to be good, I would say around anywhere between 4 and 8 BB per 100 is going to be pretty solid as you're learning the game and moving up in the stakes. And anything over that, you're just really crushing the games. So keep this in mind because on the next slide, we're going to break this down. We're actually going to look at it from the perspective of different stakes, but understand that based upon your win rate, that's going to determine how many buy-ins you need to have. And if you're new to the game, I would say at minimum, 40 buy-ins is going to be a conservative number if we don't know what our big blind per 100 win rate is. But if you know that you're struggling, you might want to even bump it up to 60 or 80 or 100 or more. And if you're playing 2-L, well, that's probably not going to be that much money anyways. So let's go ahead and let's look at this from the perspective of playing different stakes. So what I did is I calculated anywhere from 25 all the way up to 120 buy-ins for 2-L, 5-L, 10-L, 20-L, and 40-L. And so this would be a $2 buy-in game, a $5 buy-in game, a $10 buy-in game, a $20 buy-in game, and a $40 buy-in game. And so this will give you an example of where you need to be. And like I said, I think around a 40 buy-in bankroll is probably going to be sufficient for a lot of you. Now, if you do decide to multi-table, which is something that we'll talk about later in this section, you are going to need to bump up your bankroll requirements a bit more because you're playing multiple different tables. So of course, you're going to need a bigger bankroll. So let's talk about how you would calculate your BB per 100 win rate. So like I said, if you're currently not using poker tracking software that auto-calculates this win rate, you can do it in 3 easy steps. So step 1, what you need to do is you need to convert your winnings into the equivalent big blinds. And we'll do an example over here in a second. Then once you do that, you take that, you divide the total number of hands played by 100, and then you take both of those combined, and then you put the big blinds 1 divided over the total sets of 100 hands that you played, and this is going to give you your BB per 100 win rate. So let's do it with an example over here on the right. Let me get rid of all this highlighting. So let's assume that we played 20,000 hands at 5-L, and we won a total of $75. So what we would do is we take the $75, we divide it by the big blind, which is 5 cents. This is going to tell us that we won a total of 1,500 big blinds. Now what we would now do is we would determine how many sets of 100 hands that we played. So we take the total number of hands that we played, divide by 100. This is going to tell us that we played 200 sets of 100. And then what we do is we do the big blinds 1 divided by those sets of 100, which you see here, 1,500 divided by 200. This is going to give us a 7.5 big blind per 100 win rate. Pretty simple, pretty easy and straightforward. You could either just do this yourself, you could plug it into Excel and do it. Pretty simple, pretty basic. All right, so now let's talk about taking shots. So remember, taking shots is determining when we are ready to move up and also potentially when we need to move back down. So I'm going to walk you through this process of taking shots at a higher stake. And what we're going to do is, because we talked about utilizing a 40 buy-in bankroll, we're going to use this as a requirement. And we're going to take a look at moving from 5-L up to 10-L. So at the beginning, we're going to start with the 40 buy-ins at 5-L. And if we take a look at this from the perspective of 10-L, then we're only going to have 20 buy-ins. So to move up to 10-L, we need to have 40 buy-ins. So essentially, we need to double our bankroll. So once we've doubled our bankroll, we've increased our bankroll to 80 buy-ins at 5-L. Now we effectively have 40 buy-ins at 10-L. And so now we're ready to take a shot and move up to 10-L. So what do? Well, when we move up to 10-L, when we have those 40 buy-ins at 10-L, we should give ourselves a 5 buy-in loss threshold. In other words, a 5 buy-in shot. So start playing 10-L, and we want to give ourselves the threshold of potentially losing 5 buy-ins. And if we lose those 5 buy-ins, then we need to move back down to 5-L until we build up our bankroll again to this 40 buy-ins at 10-L. And then we're ready to take another shot. Now, a caveat with this and something to understand is that a lot of people I've noticed is that even though we give ourselves this loss threshold, somebody will jump up from 5-L to 10-L, and let's say in the first session they lose 3.5 buy-ins or 4 buy-ins. They automatically jump back down to 5-L. Don't do that, because variance may be taking hold here. So whenever you move up in stakes, make sure you utilize that entire 5 buy-in loss threshold and don't prematurely move back down in stakes. So I don't want you doing that because I've seen it time and time again. You got to give yourself that entire threshold of 5 buy-ins because there's the issue of variance, there's the issue of running bad, and there's also the issue of the first time that you sit down and start playing the higher stakes that you're not that comfortable, and you're probably not playing as good as you potentially could be. So make sure you give yourself that entire loss threshold. All right, so one more thing that I want to talk about is something I call the basic tenets of bankroll management. And we could essentially talk about this from the perspective of financial management, but we're going to talk about it from bankroll management for poker. Number one, never play outside of your financial means. So what does this mean? Well, for your entire savings, let's say that, again, you have $5,000. Don't play a very high stakes of poker that's going to consume a lot of your financial savings. That's out of your financial means. So play something that you're comfortable with playing, something where it's going to not affect your overall livelihood, and something where it's not going to be affecting your mental game, where you're playing what we would call scared poker, right? You want to play a stakes that you're comfortable with. So don't play outside your financial means. The second one is focus on your goals. So some people have goals of moving up stakes as fast as possible. Some people have goals of just simply working on the game. Other people have goals of just playing for the fun and enjoying the game. So don't assume that you have to move it up in stakes just because basic bankroll management tenets say you should move up in stakes because now you have 80 buy-ins or 100 buy-ins. If you just want to stay at that stake, that's perfectly fine. If you want to take a more aggressive line at taking shots, then maybe once you get up to 30 buy-ins or 20 buy-ins, if you're starting with less of a bankroll, then go ahead and do that. So it's going to be different for everybody. But remember, just focus on your goals and whatever you want to do. Just don't follow some hard, steadfast rule that somebody like I said. Make sure that you modify it per your needs and your specific goals. And then lastly, of course, play stakes that your bankroll can withstand, right? Don't take a shot at a higher stake where you only have 2 buy-ins. And if you lose those 2 buy-ins, you go bust and you have to start back down at 2-0 or 5-0. We don't want to do that. If you're going to take a shot, if you're going to play a certain stake, make sure that you're properly rolled where your risk of ruin isn't very high. So that's the basic tenets of bankroll management, and that's going to conclude our lecture on poker bankrolls and bankroll management. If you have any questions, let me know. If not, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys at the next video.